Welcome to Bold Voices, Soft Hearts, a podcast featuring stories of finding passion through pain. We're so glad you're joining us. Here's our episode for the day.
Welcome to Bold Voices, Soft Hearts. I'm your host, Misty Snyder, and I am so excited to be here with you today. If it's your first time listening, I want to welcome you and invite you to like, subscribe, and review the show if what you find here today is meaningful and encouraging. In this show, I talk to people who have found their passion through pain. I've had conversations with recovering addicts, recovering people pleasers, performers who fuel their passion in unexpected areas of their lives, and professionals who use their platforms to connect and inspire others. Today's guest is a bold voice in the disability community, and I'm pleased to welcome her to the show. Amy Julia Becker helps people reimagine the good life through her writing and speaking on disability, faith, and culture. She's the author of To Be Made Well, White Picket Fences, Small Talk, and A Good and Perfect Gift, which holds a special place in my heart. And she's also the creator of the Reimagining Family Life with Disability workshop. She is a guest opinion writer for national publications and the host of two podcasts, Reimagining the Good Life and Take the Next Step. Becker is a graduate of Princeton University and Princeton Theological Seminary, and she lives with her husband and three children in Western Connecticut. Amy Julia, thank you so much for being here.
It is really my pleasure. I'm delighted to be here with you and with whoever is listening.
Yay. Well, before we dive into some specific questions I have for you, I would just love to hear a little bit about your upbringing and what you held dear in the years leading up to becoming a mother.
Sure. So I am the oldest of four girls, and I'm very much your typical oldest child and your oldest daughter. So, type A, overachiever, pretty serious. I mean, people always thought of me as like serious. And I got good grades and actually, I mean, I have always loved school. I still love reading and learning and thinking about things and having big, deep conversations. So that was both something that I was kind of performing for other people, but also like truly loved, which is a nice thing. I'm glad about that. But all that is to say, I definitely was a kid who was always striving and trying to prove myself to others, but also to myself. Like, I think there was always a sense of, am I good enough? I'm not sure unless I keep working really hard and showing that I am. And so by the time Penny was born, I was actually in seminary. So I had come to a personal faith in Jesus when I was in high school and continued down that path and was really interested in learning more about the Bible and theology and the church and all these things. And so I was in seminary and was also happily married. And my husband and I were living at a boarding school in a dorm with 30 high school boys at the time that Penny was born. And yeah, so I mean, again, I had softened a little bit by that point. I was not 100% on the treadmill. I mean, obviously most people who are trying to prove themselves in the world are not necessarily going to seminary. And yet I still was making sure that like before Penny was born, I had all these papers that were due after her due date, but I wrote them all a month ahead of time in order to be sure that I like finished my classes and got them done before the baby was born. You know, that was that type of person. I mean, I still am in many ways, but I think I've also learned a lot since then.
So talk to us about Penny's birth and sort of the experience of becoming a mom, but also sort of launching into a community you might not have known much about.
Yes, I was launched into a community I knew nothing about so I was 28 years old, first pregnancy, first baby, and Penny was born a little bit early and she was a little bit small, but again, not any concerns immediately upon her birth. And about 2 hours after she was born, my husband was called out of the room by a nurse. I
Mm.
learned later he was brought to a supply closet with, yeah, this nurse and another doctor. Right. So, kind of um, how to give a prenatal diagnosis 101. Like they
Hot
had not
soup.
taken that class. So he came back into the room. His eyes were filled with tears, and he said, and Penny at this point was doing fine. Like it's not like she was in the NICU or something, but she also was not with us. And he comes in alone and says the doctors suspect that Penny has Down syndrome. And at that point, I really had a very few vague negative understandings around Down syndrome. I thought, I think kids with Down syndrome die early. And I know that there is, an intellectual disability, although we used different words 20 years ago to call it intellectual disability. And I knew that. And so that felt really overwhelming and really, really hard. I remember the year before Penny was born was when there was just a huge tsunami in India. And that was like the image that came to me was feeling like I was a woman on a beach and all the water was like rushing away from me when it was supposed to be staying still. And
Mm.
I knew there was like a humongous wave coming. Like it just felt like there's like this terrible thing that is coming. I, was wrong about lots of what I thought was coming, and yet those feelings were really real. And I know that there are plenty of other moms and dads and caregivers who have had a similar experience as far as just, I don't know what is happening. I think it's really bad, and I think it involves my child. And it was so, yeah, all the feelings, love and joy and gratitude. And fear and guilt and shame and anger and confusion and yeah, anxiety and all of that as well.
Yes, yes. I relate 100%, though I had a prenatal diagnosis. So much of those feelings came during my pregnancy. So I very
Yeah.
much relate to that. And I also relate to, you talked about being the oldest child and
Mm,
sort of a high achieving child. I'm an only child, and
yeah.
be lots of parallels in that sort of performative, I'm proving myself to the world, fierce independence. There can be a lot
Hmm.
of parallels there as I've met a lot of oldest children. And bearing in mind sort of your background and what you described sort of drove you in the years leading up to Penny. Can you talk to us a little bit about this idea of uh, realizing one's potential,
Mm.
how maybe your perspective has changed being in the community that you are and being a mother to Penny?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, certainly when Penny was first born, I did feel like it was my job to help her realize her potential.
Mhm.
And I do think so. One of the things that I think is true is that we, as a culture, have low expectations for people with disabilities and with intellectual disabilities that really can be wrongly limiting in terms of what is possible for them that actually could emerge out of who they are.
Yeah.
At the same time, I also think we have a culture that says you don't know who you are until you prove it. You
Mm.
don't know who you are until you've done something great.
Yeah.
And that is what I, over time, with Penny and the other individuals with Down syndrome who came into my life, I began to say, wait a second.
Yeah.
What we do does not tell us who we are. It's just not true.
Mm.
Who we are is beloved creatures who have purpose and, real ways of contributing in this world, real things to do.
Yeah.
But if we don't start in that place of that belovedness, that gift that we are to each other and to society, then we're going to get this all wrong. And I do think that idea of like fulfilling your potential is usually taken from that perspective of prove to me that you're good enough.
Yes.
Um, and if you don't fulfill your potential, then what's the point in being here, you know? And
Yes.
I just think, um, yeah, there's so much freedom in actually not feeling like I have to live up to some external standard, some, kind of ambivalent or ambiguous idea of who I'm supposed to be, or what I'm supposed to do. And I do think it was Penny, but also, actually, I mean, here's the thing. Penny, she surprised me all the time in terms of what she could do. And it was quote unquote more than what some other kids with Down syndrome were doing. And yet, what I was being invited into was this recognition of the tremendous value of all of these kids I was getting to know,
Yeah.
not because they are exceeding expectations and reading at an earlier age or taking steps or, whatever the milestones were. I was just starting to realize like those are irrelevant to
Mm.
your like not just your worth as a human being, but like the the delight that you bring, the goodness of who you are, the need that I have for you in this world, the need that we as a society have for you in this world. And I just really wanted my whole life to be reoriented, honestly, around that idea of being beloved gifts to one another as the most important thing about who we are, that we are created in love and for love, and not, you know, as a means of production or performance.
Yes. Yes. And so much to unpack there, but I feel like this is a two-sided coin because there's reaching this idea of reaching your full potential as a person with a disability, and then there's reaching your full potential as a parent to a
Hmm.
child with a disability. And
Yes.
something that I've sort of seen kind of come forth time and time again in conversations, particularly with, so Jed's 5 now, and I would say I, all leading up to now, I've had so many conversations with parents about, okay, what more can I do to get them to crawl, walk, talk, read, anything that's next on the milestone chart? What can I do as a parent to
Yeah.
help them reach their full potential? And if I don't do that, where am I falling short? And does that make me a bad parent?
Hmm.
And just sort of that that spiral that can happen when your child may not be performing the way you think they should, ergo,
Hmm.
you must not be performing the way you think you should. And so I guess my question is, when do we cease striving?
Hmm.
When do we rest as parents in the disability community, fully acknowledging what you just said, that they are capable and have their own gifts to show the world, but at what point are we just striving and pushing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are great questions, and I think that's a tension that is, going to be present for most of us for most of our lives as parents. And um, for me, I guess there are a couple things I would say. One is I remember really resisting even like setting IEP goals early on in Penny's life, or like even before IEPs when the therapist would come to the house and talk about like creating physical therapy goals. And I was like, I don't want to be on the treadmill of striving. Like, let's get off that. And they were like, but we do want to like serve your child here. Like,
Yes.
like there's a thriving life ahead
Yeah.
if, she can, sip out of a cup, like whatever it is. And so I think there's again kind of a balance there. But over time, I've realized like Penny's goals matter because she matters. Like it's not because achieving the goals matter, it's because she matters. And so what she needs and wants in order to live a full life, which I don't think is necessarily the same as fully realizing her potential, but to live a full life, I do think like yeah, there are things that she is going to want to learn. And so I've tried to I guess just make it not so much striving for like some far off image of who she's supposed to be, but like, okay, you're learning and growing. What's the next thing? Like
Mm.
what is this is early on actually at my other kids, my typically developing kids were at a Montessori school where they asked us often, what is one thing that you are doing for your child that they could be doing for themselves? And
Mm.
what is one thing that you are doing for your child that they almost can do by themselves?
Mm.
And that was the challenge to us as parents, given by the school, was like, stop doing those things. Like they can do it for themselves. And in that place where they can almost do it, like give them the chance to try. So
Yes.
there's kind of this sense of like empowering them to become who they are, rather than pushing them to prove who they are. And I mean, that's a fine line. It's not easy. The other thing I will say is that I needed to believe, and I'm sure this is true of so many moms, that my identity and my value came from being a beloved gift to this world, not from being a striving parent,
Mm.
not from proving that my daughter with Down syndrome was going to be exceptional. And so many of us just really, really struggle with believing that we are like good as we are, that we are beloved right now, and there's nothing we can do right or wrong to change that belovedness. And so I've had to really, I mean, truly practice believing that over the course of my life as a parent. And Penny has helped me with that because I know how beloved she is to me.
Mm.
So she's helped me to be like, well, if that's true of her, what if it's true of me too? And to be able to live into that. But I do think that's a challenge for many of us.
Challenge for me, big time. And uh, I really, I think that's a perfect segue to what does it look like to you to accept, and not just accept, but embrace
Mm,
that word embrace, because it feels like a hug, as
yeah.
uncomfortable as it is to think about this, but to embrace our limitations in ourselves and our kids. But I would say, particularly, this idea of limitations with our children with disabilities and how we're parenting them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so, again, so interesting because I think one of the things that's probably easier for us to accept or embrace is the limitations in our kids because we love them, right?
Yep.
And yet, if we can do the same for ourselves,
Yeah.
I think there are two things that happen. One is a deeper, actually, belief in belovedness, like for ourselves. The other is actually this openness to the ways in which our limits open up relationships.
Mm.
So, this is a story I've told before and written about, but I really felt like when my kids were little, what it meant to be a good mom was to have a garden. And I had never gardened before in my life, but my mother had had a garden and still does. And I thought that, okay, somehow now at age like 30, I'm suddenly going to become someone who loves gardening because that's what mothers are supposed to do. So I like make my husband dig a garden and I plant things for a summer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate weeding. There's nothing restorative about this. All these things that people say that is so great about gardening, I'm getting none of that. I don't even like green beans. And I planted all these green beans and I'm like very happy to support the farm stand up the road. And what are we going to do with all the zucchini? Like it was just this mess. My kids didn't want to garden with, like, it was terrible. So at the end of the summer, I literally was like, sorry, we're gonna like replant the grass and no longer have a garden. And I felt like such a failure as a mother, not just as a gardener, but as a mother. And then what was so cool, I have an aunt and my mom who love to garden. And over the course of the next couple of years, my aunt actually in particular, she has a garden that's like a small farm in her backyard. And she invited our kids to just come up a couple times a year to help plant the garden and harvest the garden and eat the produce from the garden. And if I had insisted on being a gardener and making them do like bad gardening with me with a bad attitude, they would have been like, yeah, I don't want to go with Aunt Jane. But
Mm.
instead, it was like this relationship opened up for my kids with my aunt and vice versa because I am a terrible gardener. Like my limits as a gardener actually opened up a relationship with someone else who could fill in that space. And I
Mm.
know that was a long story, but it just really illustrates for me like trusting that again, who we are is enough. and that there are things we're limited in. Like there are things that I am just not particularly good at, certainly not particularly drawn to. And,
Yes.
I'm not particularly drawn to getting up in the middle of the night with a kid who needs me, and I'm still going to do it. Like those, but there are some things where it's just like, yeah, like that's not me, and that's okay. But to say who are the people in our lives who are therefore being invited into that need, into that place, like limits and possibilities go together.
Mm.
Gifts and needs go together, but not all in one human or even in one like nuclear family. There's so much that I think we're invited into in our communities. And we've, I think, lost sight of that because there is this sense of like, I'm kind of supposed to not have limits and do it all and give it all.
Well, and particularly because there from day one, there's so many more specialists and appointments that are involved that if you're a high achieving type of person, you think, well, I guess I'm supposed to know all of these things that this doctor and this therapist is telling me. I'm supposed to just overnight become this expert. I've heard a lot of people express that. When
Yeah.
that's actually not true. Like we can lean in if we trust the people that we're working with, hopefully, and we can
Yeah.
hope to find the right people and pray to find the right people, we can lean into that expertise. And I love what you said about having an opportunity to connect with and grow with other people in our lives who do really excel or enjoy things that we might not or might
Yeah.
not know as much about. And I think that, this podcast is about finding passion through pain. And I
Mm,
feel there's really something there that every time we're experiencing something difficult and we've gone through a trial, there's these glimpses of our gifts and abilities being able to sort of rise from the ashes of
mm.
that pain. And I would love to know maybe what what has been the most painful and revealing parts of your journey that you've been on, and how maybe that has fueled what you, Amy Julia, are so gifted in.
Mm. Some of the painful things for me, actually, they probably do go back to more like the relational side of things. We have not had severe like medical or health concerns with Penny, which I know can be really painful in some families. And we have not had like really significant behavior or communication challenges, which again, I think can be just areas of pain. But we have really, it has been hard to watch Penny feel alone.
Mm.
That has been really, really painful to me, that sense of not having a lot of friends and not being like welcomed into social situations. And yet, so one thing that has done for me has been to prompt me like to actually pray for that and to pray that with Penny. And it's like a scary thing to do that with your kid because you're like, well, what if it doesn't happen? Like it just, I mean, because I'm really not sure. The evidence would suggest, that,
Yes.
um, and and yet I think what that has also given me is a chance to see the way in which there's a spiritual dimension to life that I, believe in, and I know we share that, and seeing like the love of God as something that is ever present and faithful over time.
Mm.
Where, yeah, it took a lot longer for Penny to come home from school and be like, "Oh yeah, my friend Lexi," and I'm like, "Who's that? What is happening?" And it's like, "Oh, Penny is now in school with another girl with Down syndrome who is." I mean, she really is a friend. Like we went out to Starbucks with her mom the other day, and Penny and Lexi just like sat and chatted for an hour. And I didn't think that was possible for my daughter, And so there is a sense of like th these painful places over time, and not to say that every painful place gets resolved, but
Right.
I have seen the goodness of persevering in praying and in what I always call like taking the next step, because I think this is another thing for parents. If you've got a list of 72 things that you're supposed to be doing, all you're going to do is feel like you're drowning and you're not good enough. But if you're like, okay, is there one thing that's like 5 minutes or less that I could actually do to step towards something good? And that's how I felt with Penny with friendship, where it's like, what is there one thing? Oh, I can reach out to this mom and say, do you want to get together? And it might take 3 weeks for us to like coordinate our calendars and make it happen. But we can do that and we can take one step towards friendship for her, or we can take one step. And that has been, I guess, just like a really powerful actually tool for me is to break it down into like one next step that is not overwhelming and that does not make me feel like I'm just not good enough, but
Mhm.
can actually move to at the same time move towards something really good because I do believe that is what not only is possible for our kids, but that it's like there's goodness that they bring into this whole society, the
Mhm.
more we are able to take steps towards people and towards connection within community, that's like good for everybody.
Yes, yes. And seeing that sort of happen in real time with Penny, I'm curious how that also, because you, as a beautiful writer and the work that you're doing in the disability community, I just wonder, do you ever have moments where you go, wow, not in a self-glorifying way, but wow, like my gifts are being used for
Mm.
such a time as this. Do you ever sit in that glow?
That's a great question.
Seriously, seriously.
I will say that one of the things that comes up when you're kind of as you know, like somebody who's got a social media account or a podcast or whatever is like you're kind of told look for tremendous exponential growth. Like you need to have 100,000 followers on your Instagram and you need to have da, da, da. And like I have never hit a metric that anyone else would come in and be like, yeah, well, if you're going to publish a book, you got to have this number. Like if you're going to do a da 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 da. And so I was like, I need a different way to measure what is happening through what I'm doing. Um, and it became like just hearing from the people whose lives are actually affected by reading something or listening to something that I've been able to, go to speak or write or whatever. And so I just started keeping track of those like personal positive responses to a newsletter or to an article and saying like, yeah, that is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing it for the one mom who says, "Oh my gosh, I felt like you were with me when I got that prenatal diagnosis and therefore it wasn't as hard." Or, "Whoa, I not only see my whole family different, but myself. I'm starting to believe that actually I matter in this world," right? I mean, there's not a number of Instagram followers that can like they're like
Right.
they're different scales, right? So yes, I mean I don't know how much I sit in the glow, but I do like I mean it is so deeply meaningful and it is what like keeps me going because again, it's there's no sense of like, oh, I keep going because I'm famous for my writing. It's like that's not true. I'm not. Like I keep going because I can't believe that I get to do this and to having lived now for almost 20 years with beautiful child with Down syndrome that our life can actually bear witness to some really beautiful, good and true things for parents who are kind of in, those earlier stages. That's just tremendously gratifying, and like humbling also. Like I can't believe it.
That's exactly the glow that I'm talking about. What you just described, when you can sit back and go, wow, that that has meaning, that has beauty, that's connection,
Yeah.
and I hope sincerely that you do have moments where you can um, just marvel at what God has done through you, because
Mm,
I am one of those people that read your book, Good and Perfect Gift, in the early days and just thought, I don't know. I don't know how this is ever going to come together. I don't know how I'm going to piece it together. But as you
hmm.
said, sort of that bit by bit, sometimes bit by bit, putting it together is kind of a mantra for me. You're putting it together little step by little
Yep.
step.
Yep.
Um, so basking in the glow for you and for me and for any listener maybe listening, is to me just, wow, acknowledging, okay, I've gotten through a day. I've gotten through today, and there's beauty that comes from that. Amy,
Mm.
Julia, the work that you're doing in this space is so important, and I'm going to have all the ways to follow Amy Julia in the show notes, but I just want to thank you for your time, your intentionality with our community and beyond, and the work that you're doing to sort of dismantle years of thought that can be damaging to us, but
Mm.
more so just things that we might not even be aware of that we carry. And I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. So thank
Mm.
you. Thank you.
Well, Misty, the feeling is mutual. I'm really grateful for you and for your work and the ways that you really bring people together and proclaim the truth and beauty and goodness of life and as it is given to us. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure doing this work, this good and perfect work with you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Bold Voices, Soft Hearts. We hope you'll share this episode with a friend, leave a review, and keep using your voice to spread light in the world. Bold Voices, Soft Hearts.